Hello and welcome. Some people find happiness through shopping, or a bottle of wine, talking with friends, or some form of physical exercise. But for this week's guest, Shelley Knight, true solace is found in the pages of a book, which of course is entirely to be expected from someone who describes herself as a bookworm through and through. A positive changes expert with a range of qualifications and experience that bridge the mainstream clinical and holistic mind-body-spirit arenas, Shelley Knight has a first-class degree in adult nursing and postgraduate studies in palliative care and life-limiting illness. Also, pathophysiology of cancer, cytotoxic chemotherapy, and clinical hypnotherapy, and a plethora of holistic and spiritual qualifications, including transformational regression therapy, spiritual coaching, holistic diagnosis skills, herbalism, NLP, and dream therapy. What a wonderful mix. And Shelley's the author of Positive Changes, a self-kick book, and Good Grief, the A to Z approach of modern-day grief healing, and host of the award-winning mental health show, Positive Changes, a self-kick podcast. Shelley Knight, welcome.
Thank you very much. That's quite a long bio, isn't it?
It is, and you know, it's hard to pronounce one as well. You know, you need a degree to pronounce some of those words, I'm sure. I mean, it's such an amazing range of experience you've had, and clearly something at some point switched and took you from one side to the other side, and I'm looking forward to hearing about that a little bit later in the show. But first, I want to know, books. You love books. You've been reading books since you were a child. You're a bookworm, and you have hundreds of books, and you had to pick just 10. So tell me, what was that like for you?
I just love books. I've actually faced my camera this way. If I was to turn it round, I've lost count. I have about 16 shelves over there with books. And believe it or not, when I moved house, I actually got rid of about 7 boxes. But like you said in the intro, like some people have wine, they go out, you know, they all have these vices. And mine's just books, Sandie. I just love switching off, learning. You know, I always tell my children, everyone you meet knows something you don't. And I just dive into books every night. It's my like non-negotiable, half an hour a night reading. It's just a comfort to me.
So how did you pick 10 then?
It was really hard. Seriously hard. I thought I could do top 25. But as you said, I've gone from like the clinical to the spiritual, and I've kind of chosen the books that were part of that as I sort of went beyond we're our physical body kind of thing. So it's the books that have their own little story behind them, really.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's start with your books, and then later on, I want to know what switched you from one side of the brain to the other side of the brain. The first book on your list, and are these in chronological order or order of favourites?
No, they're just, because I could only choose 10, Sandie. I was just like, right, I'm going to go with my gut instinct. So they're just the first ones I thought of.
So the first ones. Okay. So the first book is the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sogyal Rinpoche. So tell us about this book and why it made such an impact on you.
So it was with me during a real challenging time. So it's when I was training to be a past life regressionist, and I was staying over because it was like a residential for like 3 times throughout the year. And I asked if I could borrow a book. And there was like all these different books. And then if anyone's seen it, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying is a beast. It's like the War and Peace kind of size. And I thought, well, I don't think I've got time to read that, but I'll start. And not only is it really thick, it's the smallest print inside. But I thought, oh, I'll have a go, because I do, you know, it sounds really strange, but I do love death. I do work a lot with grief. You know, I run a death cafe. My next book's about grief. And so I thought I'd look into it. And it just it was like a hug in a mug, as they say, isn't it? But it was like a hug in a book. It just made sense. And it has many messages in its many pages. But for me, what I took from it, for me personally, was that how we can learn to die from living in a certain way. And I just thought it was beautiful. It's reassuring that we're here for lessons and we come back again and again and again. It was just really spiritual. But yeah, it was much about life as it was about death. And it's just what I needed at that point. I think I'd witnessed a few things in my own life and, you know, personally, but also career-wise. And it was that sort of, it was with me as I started to realize we're more than a physical body. As I said, we was doing transformational past life regression, and it just consolidated what I was learning, really. Like, you know, this is my belief system, so you can disregard it, it's not for you, but I believe we're here for a life lesson in this incarnation, and then we either learn it or we don't. We still come back until we've done all the lessons. And that was what the book was telling me about living and dying, just going round, and reincarnation. It was just beautiful, really beautiful for me.
As a nurse, I mean, you've obviously seen a lot of death. Did that influence you in any way?
Yeah, it's been huge, and I speak quite openly about this, and it's probably why I wrote Good Grief, my next book, because, you know, I had a career in healthcare, and I wasn't prepared for the journey, Sandie, you know, and I went as a mature student. I was 28 when I did my degree. And because it's healthcare, there's this kind of expectation that you're going to make people healthy. And there's so much death. I'm not saying it's 50-50, but there's a lot of death. And it might just be like the death of a known way of life, you know, like loss of health, loss of, you know, safety because you've got a diagnosis. But there's as much death and loss as there was health. And that's why I think I resonated with this book, because I took a career break from nursing, and this book come into my life during that time. And so it's just like a godsend. Like all the books I'm going to share, they just came in at a point when I needed them, like beautiful synchronicity.
As books often do, yeah.
Yeah.
So number 2, Many Lives, Many Masters, the true story of a prominent psychiatrist, his young patient, and the past life therapy that changed both their lives, by Dr. Brian Weiss. Now, this was published in 1998, and still in print, and I think, you know, opened up the eyes of many, many, many people, not just the author. So one of my favorites, and it was actually, I think it was last week or the week before, we also had it come up in somebody else's list. So you obviously came across this book during your past life regression training.
Yeah.
So you were already primed for it. But, you know, tell us what you love about this one.
Well, I still have it with me now. So it was our read material ready for going on the course. And I still have it now with all the notes inside of me. It's just, I just can't take them out because they're just my favorite pages. But what I love about this book, but the others, there's like, you know, Eben Alexander, is like these are really highly respected doctors, huge practices, highly clinical, scientific and things like that. But they had these experiences. Brian was sort of like, you know, treating Catherine for like current life anxiety and things like that. And she spontaneously went into past lives, and that's where their journey went, and that's how the book came about. And I just love it. I think it's because my own career has gone from the clinical to the spiritual. I love it when these clinical go-to figures bring spirituality. You know, they're really, what they say is worth something. So I loved it. And whilst it is a true story, it was just so easy to read. It was almost sort of like a fictitious story. But yeah, I think it's because the clinical to the spiritual and the accidental discovery, you know, we fear the unknown when really it can be the most beautiful thing.
Yeah. Well, you know, I agree with you. I think it is really important when people who are highly credentialed come forward to validate, you know, spiritual experiences, because then people will listen. They're more likely to listen to someone who's got a string of degrees and, you know, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a nurse. It was one of the things that made me interested in what you're doing, you know, because the kind of background you come from, to then move into this as a full-time work is quite something. That's a validation in itself.
Bless you.
So let's move on to the 5 stages of the soul. Number 3, charting the spiritual passages that shape our lives. Harry R. Moody and David Carroll. And this one too was published in 1997. That seems to have been a good decade, you know, for a lot of this stuff to emerge.
Yeah, no. This was one of those ones that came into my life. This was from a charity shop. So I used to go into charity shops just to buy kids' books and, you know, sort of shoes or clothes just for the garden. And I just discovered it. So there's certain words that I get way too excited about, Sandie, and soul is one of them. I love alchemy and magic as well. and I saw the word soul, so it had my attention. And I just love it because for me, it kind of like weaves through, I know, psychology, religion, myth, science, literature. It's just all there. And again, I was kind of searching. I think I must have been about 35 when it came into my life. I'm 47 now, to put it in context. I was 35, and I think I was thinking of taking the first career break from nursing, and I've done my clinical hypnotherapy. I think I could sort of like dabble with the idea of writing a, and in it, it goes through the stages of life we have, the stages of the soul. And it was just one of those books, again, that came in with the most beautiful synchronicity that I didn't feel quite as mad as before I read the book. You know, have these moments of madness where you think it's just you, you know, like you can have the husband and the children and the career, but you have that niggle, they call it the search or the searching, where you more, and it comes in around the age of 35, where you think like, oh, don't be ungrateful, because we've always been told, aren't we, gratitude, grateful, giving thanks, attraction and all that. But I was like, yummy husband, cute kids, you know, all this kind of thing. But I had that searching, and the book just says that, you know, that we go through these stages, but they say that everyone will go through that point in life where they think, is this it? Is there more?
Is this it? Yeah. Yeah, there must be more. Yeah, absolutely. Number 4, The Violet Flame to Heal Body, Mind and Soul by Elizabeth Clare Prophet. I think this is the first one of her books to come up. That too was the same decade, 1997.
I had no idea.
Tell me about this one.
So this one, you know, like I said in the charity shop with the 5 stages of the soul, I just saw the word soul and was drawn to it. This book almost attacked me, Sandie. I was in a spiritual bookshop here in Northampton, and it fell off the bookshop shelf. It just fell literally into my hands. And it's a really small book. It's really tiny, really, really diddy, flimsy almost. Do you know what I mean? It's the kind of thing you wouldn't expect to pay for. It's that small, but it literally fell into my hands. And I was just like, take it as a sign. So I bought it. And you can sort of like, you have to say like these affirmations or these, what's it like innovate, you get things, activation sort of things. And so I was doing it and doing it and doing it. And then fast forward a few weeks, bearing in mind this book fell into my hands and fell into my life, I started calling in this violet flame for protection and things like that. And I was driving back from a friend's house late one night, and it was almost like an out-of-body experience. I remember driving back across a roundabout that I go across loads. It's my way back from work, has been for years. And I was driving back when out of nowhere, a car like zoomed past me and come into my path. But I don't remember. I remember sort of like going across the roundabout, aware of something coming, like a bright light coming down. Somehow, whether it was me or someone up higher, drove me around the roundabout and then back down the original route I was going. And it was just like automatic pilot. And as I hit the bottom of the road before the next roundabout, there was a massive arch of just violet flames, like house high violet flames. And I know I sound as mad as a box of frogs, but it was that, you know, this book fell into my hands. I started calling in the violet flame. And then weeks later, I had an out of body, like self-control, like automatic pilot kind of thing. And then just drove through these things. And I was like back in the body, clear as day, driving back home. And I can't explain it, but it is just, and even now, even when I did my past life regression, or I have a mucky day or around people with sticky energy, I call in that violet flame. I'm always throwing things in the violet flame. So yeah, a small but mighty book, really. And it's just, I love the word synchronicity. I've probably used it 7 times already, I'm sure, but it just came in with the most beautiful synchronicity. And then, I don't know, we'll never know. I always think there's exit points in our life when we can leave. And I think that could have been one of them, but something saved me.
Yeah. And, you know, not an uncommon story.
Oh, really?
Many people talk, not necessarily with the violet flame, but I know many people have had experiences like that, where something happened, you know, to change the outcome of something. So your next book, I went on a search for this one, and I had to dig quite deep for it. The Silver Birch Anthology, Wisdom from the World Beyond, edited by William Naylor, originally published in 1955. Not easy to find, and certainly nobody had a description of this book. In fact, I think I saw one copy on eBay for £75.
Crikey.
Yeah. So I'm
Do next
curious
week.
to know what's so good about this one.
So my mum's friend Glenda recently died, and she was a medium, and she just left my mum loads of books, and they just didn't resonate with my mum, so she gifted them to me, and that was one of the books in there. And I think it was like 50p originally it was, and it's again a very small book like The Violet Flame. And I started to read it, and it's really old. It's 19 something.
55. Yeah.
55, yeah. So
Yeah.
really old. But it's so modern. It's a really almost surreal read. There's a bit in it, and it says like you're on earth to build character. It's the way you face your problems that makes your character. And I thought that could be a sort of like, you know, a power talker these days, like, you know, Tony Robbins of the world. But it's not. It was this channeled message, you know, Silver Birch, way back in the 1950s. And it was just one of those books that, you know, when you read it and you're just like, yes, yes. And I just got really excited by it. And yeah, it was 50p originally. I won't really stick it on eBay for £75. I just got a bit excited about the value. But another one of those books that it wasn't given to me, it was given to my mum, who then gifted it to me. And the words were just, it just blew me away how modern it was for such an ancient text, almost. Do you know what I mean? I just love it. Yeah.
Yeah. You said that the book, it touches on life, death, the afterlife, love, and the power of our mind. What did it tell you about death that you didn't know?
Oh, I don't know if it taught me anything. It's just the way it's written is beautiful. But there is like this whole sense that we just return to love, because I know a lot of people fear death. I think a lot of people fear life, if I'm honest, Sandie. But it was just like, we're here for the lessons and, you know, the building of the character, and we just return to love. And I think every time I read it, no matter how it's phrased, I think that's so reassuring. I make my husband quite panicky because I don't have a fear of death. You know, I have a beautiful husband. I've written 2 books. Our family, after a mighty journey, has completed. You know, I've done so much with my life that I don't have a fear of death. And so it's still always, I don't know, life affirming that, you know, death is just a continuation. And it's just written really beautifully, like it's a continuation, return to where you've come from. So I don't think it taught me anything new. It just consolidated, and I find that really comforting.
Now, the next book, you said that reading it proved to be a real light bulb moment in your nursing career.
Yeah.
And this was Brandon Bay's The Journey, a practical guide to healing your life and setting yourself free, which was published in 2001.
Yeah. So this was loaned to me originally by my friend Fiona. And Fiona's actually really good friends with Brendan. They did journey training. She's trained Fiona, but they've remained friends really closely. So Fiona lent it to me. And again, it's a little bit like Many Lives, Many Masters, because it feels fictitious. It just flows, and it's really, really, really easy. But in it, if no one's read it, in the journey, that Brandon basically has a massive cyst, like the size of a football, in her stomach. And they sort of say, well, we need to operate. But she intuitively knows that actually she needs to heal herself. And she keeps saying, just give me more time. And initially nothing changes, and that we really need to. But she literally dives into what is this tumor? What does it represent, sort of thing, and goes on to heal. And my background is nursing, but predominantly chemotherapy nursing. And that sort of was most of my career. And what I noticed, and I haven't got a master's and I can't scientifically prove it, but again, it's that kind of, you know, claircognizance. I just know it. I used to have a lot of breast cancer patients. And so I'd sit there opposite them administering these like chemotherapy drugs to them. And it's like a captive audience, you know, because we're always so busy and running away. But when you're having chemotherapy, you just have to stay there. And so people would open up to me, like these women would open up to me about, you know, childhood trauma, damaging relationships, not really living their life, but someone else's version of that life. And so if we're talking breast cancer, so it's all in the breast and things like that. And as I was administering and as they were being cured, they would say, it's so good, you know, these words, I've got them off my chest. And I just saw it so many times. People I saw it was with like throat cancer or esophageal cancer. it made me aware, like her book was just kind of consolidated what I'd already started to witness about this dis-ease, that when we don't get these emotions out, when we don't deal with the traumas and the challenges in our life, that it has a like emotional memory, but a physical memory within the body. And so, yeah, it started off as a really light read, but by the end, I was like, I've seen this in my own patients when they present with tumours and things like that, where it presents in the body is kind of their journey. Like they haven't got it off their chest. They've never spoken out, throat cancer and things like that. So it was really pivotal in where I am now, that I started to see kind of we are more than our physical body, but more that mind, body, spirit connection, sort of like what we think manifests, whether that's out in the universe, in our body. So yeah, it started off as a light-hearted read, you know, with a cup of tea, and by the end I was like really questioning like nursing and you know, like how we treat the symptoms but not the trigger or the cause at the base of it. So
absolutely,
light read by the end I wanted to do a master's in it all, you know.
yeah. Number 7, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, Reclaiming Your Power, Creativity, Brilliance and Dreams by Debbie Ford, which was published in 1998. What a great decade. This is a book that has come up quite a few times. And, you know, we've heard about shadow work before, and it seems to be that all of a sudden, you know, it's kind of enjoying a renaissance. You know, we're hearing more and more about shadow work suddenly. And I don't know why, but tell me, you know, when did this come into your life and how did it impact you?
So it's a more recent one. It was only about, I've got to get it, but basically 2 or 3 years ago. And it's probably longer because I think the pandemic's thrown me. It's probably 5 years ago, if I'm honest. But it's when I was sort of had that niggle that I wanted to leave nursing. We're more than the physical body, and other things we'll go into later, why I left and went to spiritual. And we have 4 children and they'd all gone to school. So, you know, I was kind of like, what am I doing? Because nursing identified me. I knew who I was. And then I was a mum, but they'd gone to school. So I started working with a life coach and she recommended it to me. And got a battered old version of it. And I just love it. And I'd like to think I teach my children this. But everyone's just kind of jazz handing their way through life, aren't they? Going, oh, I'm really happy, you know. And it's just, again, it goes back to the previous book, really, isn't it? Like the journey in my cancer patients, where we're not dealing with our emotions. We're not being true of who we are. You know, we know like a day is 24 hours. We know half of it's light, half of it's dark, but we won't ever apply that to ourselves. And I just love the way that Debbie Ford goes on about it. She didn't have an easiest life and she died quite young, like in her 50s. But it's like exercises and it's stories and it's just really refreshing. And she kind of like, she names her emotions. I can't think of them now, but it's something like, you know, like poor Peter, anxious Alice and things like that. And she always makes friends with the dark side. But I think we just need to. I mean, she talks about like if you was like really like a harsh character, like I can't think of a nice word, but I think like if you was bitchy or something, that she would say like, you know, you don't have to be really nasty. You could turn that dial back and just use it to a level of like self-defense or speaking your mind. And she's on about we've all got these dark sides and it's part of who you are, but you just might need to adjust that dial. And I just loved that. You know, I don't know if we should tone down who we are, but I can relate to it. I don't the whole lightness thing.
I really enjoyed, I read that book back in the probably around about 2001 and found it very powerful. So your next book, it had you saying yes aloud many, many times, and it's called Witch Unleashed, Untamed, Unapologetic, Lisa Lister. That was published in 2017.
I'm getting more modern, aren't I? I love this book. Again, a recommendation from a friend. But I love the word witch. I really do. And so, like, when I was younger, like, my mum might say it about my mother-in-law or something. Do you know what I mean? But it was always a negative kind of word, but it just triggered a curiosity in me. I was just like, I love that word, and I really do. And my husband calls me a witch. You know, you might have been offended like 10 years ago. I was like, thank you, darling. I just love it. I really do. And so, yeah, she's just unleashed, untamed, unapologetic, and it's just refreshing. It's a little bit like a beginner's guide to witchcraft, but really it's just about embracing your inner power. And I love it. She's just got no filter. I mean, I thought I had no filter, but I'm quite well behaved compared to Lisa Lister, the author. And it's just a refreshing read. You know, I think so many times, like when we're writing books or going for a job interview, we try and tick the boxes, don't we? And it's just like, just be you. It's a bit like you know, the dark side of the light chasers. I think we're always trying to push down who we are. Whereas this book's like, bring it all up. You know, whatever you are, just let it come up. And I just love books like that, you know, real vibe.
Well, I think the words unleashed, untamed, and unapologetic, I mean, you know, there's an invitation right there. Great words. So number 9, Harmonic Wealth, The Secret of Attracting the Life You Want by James Arthur Ray. And this book was published in 2008. So you mentioned Colm Holland, who once described you as an alchemist, and Colm's been on this on this show, and I've interviewed him, I think, more than once. And of course, he wrote a book all about the alchemist. So when did you come across Colm, and how did this particular book impact you? What did it tell you that you didn't already know?
Quite a lot. Yeah, so I met Colm through O-Books. So he's an O-Books author like myself, and so like when I first got like the book deal, we got introduced, and I went on is it the Alchemy Lab, his podcast. Yeah. And he just described me as an alchemist. And I was like, thanks very much, thinking, I have no idea what it means, but I love that word. And he said that basically that I naturally manifest things like a natural magical process. And I was like, oh, I get that, because I've manifested sort of like completed my 4 children, I met my husband, I have the house, even my latest car was on a vision board, and I bought that a few months ago. So I do, yeah. And so he described me as an alchemist. And so I do manifest a lot in my life. I am really blessed. And so this book is all about manifesting, and it's quite humorous. And I think that's what I love about it. You know, like there's so many serious books about spirituality and manifestation and business books, and it's all very serious. And this, I mean, this, is it James Arthur Ray? Hilarious. And I think that just really resonated with me. He talks about, like, I think it's 5 pillars that he breaks it down into.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, and he's just like, I don't know, he kind of laughs at himself, and he's really honest. And again, it's that authentic self, isn't it? Where you just think, oh, thank goodness for that. And he's just really honest. I tried this, that didn't work. And it's just magical. It's even got a metallic cover. I think the magpie in me was just like, oh, let me in. But yeah, it's brilliant. A real fun read, you know.
So it was published not that long after The Secret, you know, became such a big hit. You didn't read The Secret?
Well, I've been told or told off, Sandie, I'm not sure, it's a fine line, at so many times in my life, because there's certain books that I just don't get. And so when I was younger, I tried to read the Celestine Prophecy, and I'm sure people have been on your show and they've said, this book, I just don't get the appeal. I honestly don't. Bizarrely, I have 2 copies on my shelf, but I've never finished one. And the other one is The Secret. And I don't know if anyone that's read it, you'll know it's got different fonts in, the little quotes here and there. And it just doesn't resonate. It hasn't fallen into my life. It hasn't been recommended in my life. But I've been told that I'll never amount to anything spiritually because I don't read the most important text. And I was like, you know what, I'm not doing too.
And who's to say what are the most important texts?
Yeah. Because it depends on your journey. Like the books I'm sharing today, you said, oh, we've had a few people. Then there's some that haven't. No. But, you know, The Violet Flames, my story, and it resonates with me. But, you know, I've not read all The Secret, all the Celestine Prophecy. They're just not for me.
Well, I'll tell you a secret. I haven't read The Secret either. It does not attract me at all.
No.
Not at all. It's not that I don't believe in the law of attraction, but I don't feel that, I think they've skated too much. They've given people a tidbit, and a lot of people have been very upset when they haven't been able to manifest. So I don't, it's too lightweight for me.
Yeah, it didn't feel authentic. There was like big names in it, and it just felt a bit disjointed to me. But I love things like, I know law of attraction is very, a massive thing, isn't it? But my life coach I mentioned earlier, who mentioned like the dark side, the light chasers, she always used to say that it's not really law of attraction, it's law of vibration. And I love that. That I get.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last book on your list is The Truth About Angels, Decoding the Secret World and Language of the Afterlife by Teresa Chung. Published, is this her latest book, published in 2021?
Yeah.
Teresa's also been on this show as well as my radio show, so I know of whom you are speaking. So what do you like about Teresa's book?
So all the books I've shared, because we were saying earlier I could have done like 25, but I chose 10 that really symbolized or got me through something, like, as part of my shift. And so for me, I feel quite emotional to say this one actually, but for me, I think we're all guilty of not realizing how far we've come in life. We always sort of like remember like the challenges, but rather than, you remember the bad times, but you don't see your resilience and your brilliance and your determination. And so Teresa Chung's book was out this year, but my first ever spiritual book, going back nearly 16 years ago now, to where we had our first child, was a Teresa Chung book. And I brought it from a little village fete just down the road. We haven't moved far. It was like 40 pence or something. And it was about angels, and angels aren't really my thing. I don't really resonate with angels, but I loved the book. It was just like really, it's just thought provoking. That whole thing I said earlier, that everyone you meet knows something you don't. And that's why I love books. So angels, into this day, 16 years later, don't always resonate with me, but they do. I'll come to why I'm laughing in a minute, but they do come into my life. So Teresa's book was 16 years ago, and then her book was out this year, and I'm one of the authors in the book. So you forget, like, when I bought that first spiritual book in a village fete, and then fast forward 16 years and I actually feature in a book, because I had a really I'm laughing because people have those really beautiful stories about an angelic connection. That mine was like the wonky donkey version of spirituality when I had an angelic encounter, and so I shared it, and it's in her book. So I love it because, to me, well, one, she let me put my bizarre story in it, but it just shows you how far you come in life. We're always so busy looking forward, but sometimes we just need to look back and look, how far we've come. So to me, to be in like the first book I read to then be in her latest was a real, I don't know what it is, but probably why I feel complete, why I scare my husband by saying I quite happily die tomorrow, because I feel I've accomplished so much in life.
So tell us about your angel experience.
Yeah, so I've been told, you have angels around you. You've got loads of angels. If you could see my studio here, there's nothing angelic. I've got like fairies, Buddha, fairy, Kuan Yin. I've got all that kind of thing. But I'm told that they're around me all the time. And so I thought, I'm going to tap into this, because I'm ever so friendly. I thought I'd just have a go. I'll speak to an angel. And so I started to tap in, like sat there, in my energy, trying to connect with this angel. Apparently is always with me. And I'm quite clairaudient and clairvoyant. So I could hear this name. And I think in my egotistical state, I thought they were trying to say Michael. So I was going, is it Michael? Is it? I thought I got this rock star angel, but it's not. It's a little short purple one called Muriel. And I was thinking, must be saying Archangel Michael wrong, but no, I've got a little purple lady called Muriel. That's my angel.
And what does Muriel do for you?
I don't know, because I sort of discovered it, and that was it. But she's sort of very much a really, really gentle energy, but not like a big archangel. It's just like having like a nan with me, if I'm quite honest.
Do you call upon her for help with anything?
No, I work with Kuan Yin.
So she's just hanging around.
waiting for me to get a name right. I keep calling her Michael. Yeah. No, I call him Kuan Yin a lot, and Sandie Man from the Violet Flame. You know, and I have had guides like Sending Masters coming over the last year and a half. But yeah, I'm just not an angel. I'm cowering as I say this. I'm not an angel person in case I get an angelic clip with a wing or something.
Yes, Muriel might hit you with a handbag. Because
apparently they're around me, but it's, you know, it's a bit like the books, that it's just not me. I love Ascended Masters and Goddess, you know, things like that. But yeah, sorry, Muriel.
So that's your 10 books. What are you reading now?
Oh, what am I reading? I've got, you know, I've got like 10 by the side of my bed. I've been reading a fictitious book actually by Bridget Sinclair, but it is spiritual.
We just had her on the show 2 weeks ago.
Thank you. Yeah. So she's like a soul sister. So normally, like all the books I've shared there are, you know, they aren't fictitious, all that. But again, she's with like John Hunt Publishing, my publishing house, and I was sent a copy, and it's just brilliant. It's about this lady called Katie, who's sort of like this stressed mum who's ticking all the boxes, you know, like she's got the career and that. But it's literally, yeah, but it's just like so much spiritual tools. It's got like aurasomas, soul readings, you know, channeling, getting messages, oracle cards, you know, your soul name. And so it's really lovely. So that's my current read, Red Press.
So you said that you do not have any fear of death. What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Gratitude. It was like a daily routine, but it's quite spiritual, so I call it my daily routine. I lay there and do the Louise Hay thing, and I practice gratitude because she did it. She's meant to have done like 50 things where her feet touched the floor. So I sort of, you know, give thanks to my gorgeous husband beside me, for the shelter, that I've slept well during the night, my body, which enables me to get up, the fact that I'm even awake because I worked at end of life quite a lot. So, you know, when you open your eyes, I don't go, oh, it's Monday. I'm sort of like, you know, thank you, new beginnings kind of thing. I've had a really difficult fertility journey, which I speak about quite openly. And so we have 4 children, but they get me out of bed in the morning, sort of like, I mean that because that's been such a journey, but also because they bounce on my head, if I'm honest. But I get up, I do 10 minutes yoga, which used to be my quiet time, but now the kids or the dog join in, so it's slightly less spiritual. I do a tarot card for the day ahead. You know, I don't mind dying, but I'm very impatient soul, and I don't like the unknown. So I'll do a tarot card every morning for a little bit of sneak insight. And then I have a nutritious breakfast, walk the dog and speak to the universe. And then, you know, it's a really busy house. We have 4 children. There's 2 at secondary school, 2 at primary. There's a dog. My husband has his own company. You know, I'm an author and podcaster. So it's really busy. We've let go of a lot of stuff. I think the pandemic's probably done that for a lot of people, where we had friendships that weren't serving us, jobs that weren't really probably in line with where we should be going. Our children obviously needed us for their mental health and things like that. So loads of things get me up in the morning, but I think it is the end of life. You know, every morning you wake up is a privilege denied to many. Make the most of it.
Yeah. Tell us about the Death Cafe. I mean, you know, I can't quite get my head around people, you know, meeting in a coffee bar, you know, and just talking about death.
Yeah, so that's me. I left nursing in November 2019, but I left knowing that so many of my local community were affected by grief. And why I wrote my next book, Good Grief, is because, well, for many reasons, but one of the reasons was because I would see people by their loved one's bedside as a nurse. That loved one would die, and people just froze in that chapter of their life. You know, you've got your whole life story, but they would freeze in that death. So when I left nursing, I still wanted to help those that were grieving. So Death Cafe is not me. It was created by the late John Underwood, and it's a big movement across the world where people just come together to talk about how death's affected them, whether they have a fear of death. But generally, my one, it's called Good Grief Northampton Death Cafe. So it's to come and talk about your grief. So we run it last night actually, and so we just meet up every 2 months, borrow a really nice energy tapas bar, and we just come and talk about it. But there's like something like 12,000 cafes in 80 countries throughout the world, and you just borrow a venue. You can even do it in your home, and you just have members of your local community come together to talk about death and grief, because people who followed me for a while, and my beautiful stepdad died in 2005. So I hadn't had much loss in my life, and said it was healthcare and always health. And then my dad died suddenly, my granddad died, my gran died, an auntie, my friend committed suicide, then my fertility journey. So I've had so much loss, but I've always moved on from it, and I just try and encourage other people to do the same. And like, my dad died 16 years ago, just before my first son was born, and I still talk about it, and I still have those moments where I go, oh my God, I've got to tell Dad, and it's 16 years on. So I know there's people out there going through the same, but I think the problem we have in society is we don't speak about grief or death, for one, but people sort of rally around, like we used to say at nursing, like rally up the troops, get people to help you. But after like the funeral, people go back to their own lives, and you're kind of left there.
Yeah.
And certainly after years, people say, you're not still going on about that, are you? But at my death cafe, you can talk whether it's 30 years ago or 3 months ago. And it's just, again, that whole getting your words out, that dis-ease is what I'm trying to create.
Yeah, it's really important, that we allow people to talk about grief. It's, we're all afraid of somebody else who's grieving because we don't know what to say. So we end up saying nothing, which is worse than saying something. Yeah, I understand that. Part-time superwoman, I can understand that. That was one of your key words or key phrases. Yes, doing all the things you do with 4 children, you've got to be superwoman. I'm curious to know, at what point did the light go on for you and really encourage you to not just dabble, put a toe in the water, whatever, but really switch from medicine and what you were doing to working full-time in this arena? Yeah,
so I'd had moments where I'd had a shift for sure. So like when my beautiful stepdad, we call him Badger, because he had dark hair with a blonde streak through the middle. And so when Badger died, there was a shift then that I went from acute medicine into oncology because I wanted to do it. It was like a push. But it was during my last pregnancy, and I was 40 years old, pregnant with triplets. We'd already had like 7 losses that we know of. So I was pregnant with triplets, and then we miscarried, and then was told to terminate our last daughter. She's 7 now, in case anyone's about to cry. She is 7 and amazing. But it was during that last pregnancy with triplets, then twins, then just Daisy, told to terminate. And I was told to terminate by the hospital I was working at the time. And to them, it was just sort of like, well, she's never going to make it beyond 28 weeks of pregnancy. Certainly won't survive in the outside world because she's surviving off your placenta and things like that. And they gave up on me medically, and they told me to terminate. And I couldn't do it because my body had naturally lost so many pregnancies anyway. I was 40 years old and clairvoyant. So for about 18 months beforehand, I knew I had a dark-haired baby girl to come. And but on paper, it wasn't good. She had 1 in 80,000 chance of making it. She had a rare condition called CPAM and a secondary condition called pulmonary sequestration. So she basically didn't have a left lung, and all her heart wasn't. People say your heart's in the right place. Hers wasn't. It was on the other side of the body. Just loads of things. And so I think, having hit rock bottom, I did want to commit suicide. It wasn't all determination and clairvoyancy. I did have my semicolon moment where I thought, do I end my life story here, or do I go all in and make the most amazing climax, which I'm working on still doing that. But it just changed in me that, these were people I've been working with for years. They knew sort of my medical history, and they're just like, I'll just terminate. And there's a kind of mentality. It's one of those things people get wrong in grief, isn't it? Where they just go, oh, obviously not meant to be, try again, have another one. and that wasn't an option. Neither was termination for me. And so there was a shift in me that I just thought, I can't trust the clinical world, but I'm going to trust that vision I've had for 18 months. Do you know what I mean? So I went all on in, and bless her, she's 7 years old now, and she's an absolute earth angel. She's our cuddle monster. She's amazing. But I tried things I never would have thought of, Sandie. So I had Reiki healing every couple of weeks. Guides came in. She had psychic surgery. I read books, of course I did, but I read books on miracles, affirmation, visualization. I worked with colour, only eat nutritious foods, connected to Mother Nature. I just tried every spiritual tool I could try, because clinically there was no one believing in me. And sometimes, well, always in life, if you believe in anything in life, just believe in yourself. And so from that, I did return to nursing afterwards, but I soon left as well. Yeah. So that's where it came from, like working clinically and being told it's not going to work, into, you know, having a glimmer of hope and going all in spiritually. And I've never really looked back. You know, a lot of the tools in my book, Good Grief, are things that I tried to bring Daisy to fruition. And it probably was like a grief that I'd only ever known clinical. I've worked in healthcare for 30 years, you know, since I was like about 16 or so. I've always worked in doctor's surgeries or in like care homes and things like that. But yeah, I guess a part of me, or part of the identity I had, died, and I just didn't really fully trust clinical again.
Has your daughter, I mean, the physical conditions that they was, you know, telling you about then, have they been resolved?
Yeah, so she went for major surgery. Was taken on by a hospital. I won't name which hospital, because then you probably guess which is the nasty one. Anyone here in the UK. But yeah, she was taken on by another hospital which has specialist services. And at 4 months, she had major lung surgery. And so she's a one lung child, and she was recently admitted into hospital due to COVID. Her little body couldn't cope. But she's amazing. I mean, she got like stickers on Sports Day for coming first place in like running, you know, and it's amazing. And again, we're saying like, never forget how far you've come in life, because she lost it to her first tooth recently. And I cried so much, Sandie, because I think, oh my God, you know, she's here and she's achieving these things that, you know, clinically.
She's doing what other kids are doing.
Yeah. And she's just really down to earth and gorgeous, really intelligent. And if it's all right to share, because what I learned when I did my past life regression was about the soul. Like when you're pregnant, the soul doesn't join at the point of conception. It comes in when it's ready. And we have this little thing in our house at night that I say to my kids, I love you. And they go, I love you more. And I go, I love you more. And she turned around recently and she goes, I love you more because I chose you. I went, oh, did you? And she went, yeah, I did. She goes, you know, the funny thing though, Mum, she goes, I nearly didn't come. And I cried so much. She goes, you're about to have me. And I jumped in suddenly and I just cried. I went, I know you did. You know, out the mouth of babes. So yeah, she wasn't meant to make it, and she jumped in last minute, but she's just this amazing spiritual earth angel. She's my kind of angel. That's my kind of angel I like.
Yeah, I get it. Wow, what an interesting story, and what a lot you've been through. And, you know, you've packed a lot into the years that you've had. I mean, all the different things that you've done, as you said. It's an inspiration, and I'm really glad you shared that story with us, because I think there are times when people feel the odds are against them in one way or another, and there's always the possibility of a miracle, always.
Yeah, I think I said that on Colin's podcast. I said, well, you know, I'm a realist. I believe in miracles. He's like, I love that. But it is, you know, and as I said, if you believe in anything in life, believe in yourself, because, you know, I've worked with the human spirit for decades, and you are a mighty powerful being, you know, and we forget that.
Absolutely. Well, Shelley, thank you. It's been really interesting talking to you. I've really enjoyed our time together. And thank you for adding your 10 best spiritual books to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've loved it.
If you want to know more about Shelley, you can check her out at Shelley F Knight. That's KNIGHT.com. And thank you at home for joining us. You can see previous videos in this series on our YouTube channel. as well as the video page at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter and be the first to know who's coming up next. You can also download all of these interviews as podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, Audible, Anchor, and many other podcast platforms. That brings us to the end of this week's show. I hope you'll join me again at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me.